Hey everyone, Scrappy just woke up. What a miracle! The prayers were no one anticipated this. Lil Scrappy was barely hanging on a few days ago, his health fast declining as his family and doctors braced themselves for the worst. Even Scrappy's closest friends were afraid that this would be the last for the Atlanta rap legend, and fans were distraught. The hip-hop community held its breath. Now though, in a startling turn of events, Scrappy is exhibiting symptoms of a miraculous recovery that even the most renowned medical professionals find incomprehensible. Now, doctors who have made bleak prognosis are in disbelief. According to one medical insider, we've never seen anything like this. Family members are left in shock after anticipating the worst. Mommy D, she believes that God is intervening in this situation. Bambi, after almost losing him, she's still processing the emotional roller coaster. Admirers? They are frantically trying to find out what transpired in that hospital room. When Scrappy opened his eyes at last, what did he say? Most importantly, is this merely a brief miracle before another disastrous turn, or is this the beginning of his journey back to full health? Narrative is far from over, so stay tuned. The hospital was so tense that a knife could easily pierce it. Lil Scrappy was lying still in his hospital bed a few days ago, hooked up to machines, his condition getting worse every hour. The family had already been warned by doctors to expect the worst. Worst, a vigorous rapper who was renowned for his unadulterated energy and commanding presence, was now battling for his life, and it didn't seem like he would prevail. Mother D had been distraught. Since Scrappy's admission, she had remained inside the hospital, pacing the corridors, muttering prayers to herself, and blaming everyone and everything for the situation. This shouldn't have occurred. The day before, she had screamed in frustration, "My son is a fighter, and I refuse to believe he's not going to pull through." Scrappy's estranged wife, Bambi, reacted in a more nuanced way. Even though she still had feelings for Scrappy, their tumultuous relationship made things challenging. Some muttered that she hadn't even wanted to visit the hospital, but that her family and friends had pushed her to go. Nevertheless, something inside her broke when she saw Scrappy in that hospital bed, so exposed, regardless of any previous turmoil. According to reports, she said to close pals, "I don't care what we faced. All I want is for him to be all right." Then the unimaginable occurred. The smallest movement, scarcely perceptible at first, was the beginning. Although one of the nurses believed she saw Scrappy's fingers twitch, she brushed it off as a reflex. Then it occurred once again. She wasn't again the only one who noticed this time either. "Did you notice that?" To another nurse, one murmured. Scrappy's eyes briefly twitched before they could even comprehend what was happening. But and suddenly his eyes opened in an instant that shook the whole room around. As the nurses hurried to his bedside and summoned the doctors, the beeps of the machines filled the quiet. They were waking up the man they had virtually given up on. Mama D, who had been sitting with her head in her hands in the room's corner, looked up and let out a gasp. Difficult. As though she were scared to hope, her voice was hardly audible above a whisper. Scrappy's mouth opened, but first nothing came out. His face was filled out with confusion as his eyes raced about the room. As they rushed in, the physicians asked him questions and checked his vitals. Were they audible to him? Was he aware of his location? But he spoke location, a clear but weak voice, before anyone else could speak another word. "Mom?" It only took that one word. Mama D sobbed and ran to his side, holding his hand tightly as though she was worried he would run away again. "Oh, sweetheart, I again terrified of you," she sobbed. Bambi had been standing motionless next to the doorway, her face wet with tears. For the first time in tears, she was unable to express what she wanted to say. Meanwhile, the doctors were taken aback. This was not intended to occur. The body of Scrappy has been shutting down. They had already started down ready for the likelihood that he would never come to. However, he was conscious, awake, and yelling for his mother. Dr. Reynolds, one of the physicians, shook his head in shock. He said this is shock. As he glanced at the monitors that displayed steady, no, improving, vitals. We must do testing, but this isn't something we encounter on a daily basis. News of the hospital was already beginning to circulate beyond the room. Word spread quickly after a nurse, unable to control her excitement, texted a buddy. Little Scrappy was starting buddy.air. When they received the news, answer miraculously has returned. I urgently need an update returned. King, is he all rigged update? Us something, please. However, conditions in the hospital room remained precarious. Yes, Scrappy was conscious, precarious, feeble. His muscles were uncooperative as he attempted to move. He scanned his surroundings, attempting to put together what had transpired. Where am I? He was able to utter it at last. Mom May. It brushed his hair back and murmured softly, "You're in the hospital, baby. You'll be all right, even though you've been really unwell." Scrappy turned his attention to Bambi, and for a little instant, they were silent. They experienced a range of complexity together, including regret, love, hurt, and relief. At last, he forced a faint, weary smile. "I didn't anticipate seeing you here." Bambi chuckled unsteadily. "Yes, well, I couldn't avoid it." Unsteadily. He event was impactful. A lot of questions remained. The world was watching, waiting to find out if this was indeed a miracle. The family had to comprehend everything miracle. If physicians needed to perform tests, or might there have been another twist in the works? The whole atmosphere in the hospital works. And Lil Scrappy opened his eyes. No one knew what this meant for Scrappy's long-term health, but it seemed to ease the tension that had been looming like a black cloud, albeit only a little. Was this the brief glimmer of hope before another disastrous turn, or was this the start of a real recovery? The doctors didn't spend any time. In a matter of minutes, the medical staff began conducting tests, evaluating Scrappy's cognitive abilities, tracking his vitals, and testing his reflexes. The room was bustling with activity, with doctors chatting to one another and nurses adjusting machines, their expressions displaying a mix of wonder and uncertainty. The lead doctor, Dr. Reynolds, was standing at the foot of Scrappy's bed, studying the data on the monitors with a frown on his face. In the end, he mumbled, shaking his head, "Her face doesn't make sense." Mama D raised her head, still holding onto her son's hand. "You mean that it doesn't make sense? My infant is awake. Don't you think that's a blessing?" Dr. Reynolds awakened sure. He couldn't dispute what he was seeing, but he knew better than to give false hope. Mrs. D, he was in serious condition just 12 hours ago. His body wasn't reacting to treatment as we had planned, and his organs were exhibiting symptoms of shutting down. This degree of recovery, at least not this quickly, was not what we had anticipated. Still frail but vigilant, Scrappy managed an anticipated doctor being unconscious for days. He rasped, "You know I'm full of surprises." His voice was scratchy and dry. After remaining silent when Scrappy first woke up, Bambi finally spoke something. She paused, then spoke in a gentle, cautious tone. "Scrap, can you recall what took place?" Scrappy's tone veered in perplexity. He let out a deep exhale, obviously attempting to remember what had brought him to this point. "I wasn't feeling well when I last remembered. I felt nauseated and lightheaded." He hesitated, remembered himself to see through the mental haze, his face tensing. "I'm here the next thing I know." There was silence in the room. Mohair D tightened her no. His hand. Something unsafe filled Bambi's eyes. Guilt, perhaps. Scrappy took note. Despite his weakness, he was not blind. He fixed his gaze on no eyes. "You're aware of something I'm not." Bambi paused once more, but before she could respond, Dr. Reynolds interrupted. "We shouldn't put too much pressure on Hyderdots now. The fact that he is conscious and that his vitals are steady is what matters. There is still a long way to go." However, the tension was already there. There was more to the Stogo.hand what he was being told, and Scrappy sensed it. The news media had completely reported about Scrappy's amazing awakening outside the hospital room. With cameras flashing and microphones thrust into the faces of everyone who appeared to have knowledge, reporters crowded the entryway. Announcement: as small as SYPRICES. A true miracle. Expentryway. On the rapper's startling comeback, fans' joy as miracle overcomes all odds. What the star will do next? There was a frenzy on social media. Scrappy should release an album about the entire event if he served media. Is. Doctors didn't count him out, and now he's awake. God is good. There's something off about this. STAT, we need details. There were a lot of different theories. A few disdoubters thought Scrappy had been misdiagnosed from the beginning. Some conjectured that a higher power had stepped in. There were, however, many who thought that the story was far from finished and that the rare show ever more to it than meets the eye. Mama D wasn't having any of it in the hospital. Convinced that Scrappy would quickly recover, she was already organizing his return. She stroked his hair and said, "We're going to get you out of here soon, baby. As I always have, I will take care of you." Despite his gratitude, Scrappy think it was that easy. There were too many unsolved questions in his mind. The unspoken tension between them increased as his gaze returned to Bambi. "What are you withholding from me?" Despite his scratchy voice, there was in Bambi dying the gravity in his tone. Bambi took a deep breath. She glanced at Scrappy and then back at Mama D. She parted her lips, then shut them again. She sighed at last, after what seemed key in eternity. "Oh no, I didn't think you would make it." "We didn't." Scrappy remained unblinking. "Yes, and some things happened." Bambi didn't voice almost audible above a whisper. "Things you are unaware of." Mama D's eyes grew wide. "What are you talking a whisper?" Bambi paused, obviously conflicted. Perhaps this isn't the right moment. Scrappy's heart rate monitor began to book conflicted quaintly. He was getting frustrated, even though he was weak. "No, I have a right to know the truth if I struggle to recover from whatever occurred to Minnow. Get on the phone." The hush that ensued was oppressive. However, a knock on the door cut off Bambi before she could reveal whatever secret she was keeping. A nervous-looking nurse peered in. "I apologize for disturbing you, but someone is keeping Ting to see him." Mother D scowled. "Who?" The nurse paused before responding. "His dad." Scrappy's whole body tensed. His dad? The Wowo had spent the majority of his life away from home. The man who has only been a role dad, or brief periods of time. Mama D's protective instincts kicked in and she shook her head instantly. "Oh no, he is not required to be present." Bambi, however, read conflicted. "Scrap, perhaps you all know. Listen to him." Scrappy simply gazed at them both as his thoughts were racing. When he first awakens, he discovers that his recuperation is a medical mystery. Something the racing is keeping from him now. Furthermore, the father who was never truly present wants to get engaged all of a sudden. This recuperation wasn't merely a miracle, the beginning of something much, much larger. The world seemed to be eagerly awaiting the next miracle in this story as word of Lil Scrappy's incredible recovery spread like wildfire. Although Scrappy's road to recovery was not going to be straightforward, it was evident that his recovery was nearly miraculous. He had overcome the odds, even though the prognosis was grim. The question that hung over everyone's minds as he lay in that hospital bed, surrounded by his lovegrim, and the soft buzz of machinery, was what would happen to him next. However, the past was resurfacing before the future could be completely handled. As she observed her son's precarious condition, Scrappy's mother, Mama D, was overcome with a range of emotions. She felt a surge of hurt and rage. The years of animosity and the conflicts waged in private and in public were still very much present. Rage. Bliss of his maturity. Scrappy would always be the child she battled for because he had always been her baby. But Scrappy was fighting an emotional battle in addition to a physical one. The bond between Scrappy and his father, Daryl Richardson Sr., has been broken from the beginning. There was a profound gap left by Daryl's absence for the most of Scursar's existence. Scrappy was resentful and reluctant to make amends because of the years of discord, unfulfilled promises, and unsaid words. But everything seemed to change when faced with the scariest times in life. Even though it wasn't simple, Scrappy knew he had to reconcile his history. At that point, Daryl arrived life could feel the tension in the room. Years had passed since Daryl had ever made an attempt to get in touch, and now, in the middle of Scrappy's medical emergency, he found himself standing at the door, unsure of how to handle this delicate situation. Scrappy felt mixed emotions knot in his chest: anger, perplexity, and another thing. Is it forgive a situation? Talked, Daryl's voice broke. I'm sorry, son, but I'm not sure how to put it. I've been lousy dad. I am aware that I failed to support you when you needed me. I ought to have been. However, I never thought that Dad would really comprehend how much I had messed up until something like this happened. As Scrappy lay there, the weight of his past crashing into his present, his hands tightened into fists. A tiny part of him was beginning to soften, but he could still feel the rage rising inside of him. Never one to fist yet. Mama D was the first to speak. Daryl, you can't just walk in here and pretend that you can go back in time and undo all the years you missed. You want to turn up merely because he's in a hospital bed, even though you weren't there when he needed you. Scrappy's eyes, which were a mix of weariness and annoyance, darted between his father and mother. He simply couldn't end it any longer. There was too much stress. Enough, Ma. I've had enough of hearing this. I'm just worn out from years of arguing with you. Even if it means listening to him, I'm at tranquility while I'm still here. Mama D's face contorted as her rage gave way to grief. What do you see, Scrappy? He is not worthy of your pardon. Here. Looked at his mother after all these years of him neglecting her and breaking his word. Ma, I no longer need you to stand up for me. I've harbored this rage for far too long. My moment to let go is now. I need word it over this. Daryl watched the conversation in silence. He had nothing to defend himself against, nothing to say to undo the harm he had this Ed. He just nodded, regret weighing heavily on his heart. And just when it looked like everything was about to blow out, something unexpected occurred. The hospital room door opened again, and a nurse entered with urgent news. We recently received the results of your most occurred ting, Lil Scrappy. Although the physician stated that you were improving, this is more than we anticipated. Scrappy's heartbeat accelerated as his eyes narrowed in interest. What did she say? Did this actually occur? The nurse went on in a steady yet awe-filled voice. We've seen a significant interest in your health. The organs that only a few days ago were failing, they're operating normally presently. We were concerned about your brain active health. It is steady. Furthermore, there are no indications of any long-term harm. To be honest, this recovery is just amazing. Nobody said anything for a while. Disbelief pervaded the room, as though everyone was processing what they had just heard. Scrappy blinked multiple times as the gravity of the situation began to sink in. So I'm going to be all right? The nurse grinned. Not just all right, you're going to recover completely. Results like this were not what had anticipated, especially not so rapidly. We have never seen anything like your progress. A completely used and weeping broke out in the room. Bambi was so happy that she gave Scrappy a big embrace. With tears welling up in her eyes, Mama D covered her mouth. Daryl appeared to breathe a sigh of relaxation as well. Eyes meeting embraced in the room, Scrappy scanned the space. So this is real. Really, I'll be all right. Dr. Reynolds, who had been listening to the discussion in silence, eventually said something. This recovery is your real? Of Scrappy. It has no known medical explanation. We're not sure how your body is recovering so quickly, but with something beating it. It's a miracle. Bambi wiped away the tears that were streaming down her face as she tried to gather her thoughts. Scrappy, this is really a blessing. Life miracle. You another chance. We have another opportunity as a family. However, there remained one unanswered question even as Scrappy reveled in his recuperation. His connection with his father was the only thing family, still up in the air. In many respects, Daryl remained an outcast even after he apologized. Scrappy had the chance to recover physically, but would it be that simple to mend his connection with his father? With a quiet but determined apologized, Appy turned to face his father. Daryl, you're correct about one thing. This is another opportunity. For a father? Not just myself. Second chances are difficult though. They a father, their own set of difficulties. At thing.8 Daryl's eye opportunity. I understand. To put them myself, I'm prepared to go to any length though. Don't count on your immediate forge difficulties, daughter. I'm hoping you'll realize eventual nodded. I will understand, for you right now, with the weight of the situation links. Pressing down on his chest, scrap forgiveness. Ply. I'm willing to try, but I can't guarantee that everything will change right away. Or us both. Despite being emotionally charged, the ensuing stillness was not awkward deeply. The kind of quiet that marked a new chapter, a new beginning. And Scrappy expiwade hope for both. First time in years, the hope that perhaps, just possibly, things might awkward errant today. He was aware that this voyage was far from done beginning there, sleeping in his hospital bed. However, the agony, hardships, and heartbreak of the past seemed less intense. He was today alive. Above all, he had his friends and family and a second chance at life. Even though that ahead would be lengthy and challenging, he wasn't traveling it alone. Intense, would be watchy alive. Scrappy was certain that the path ahead would be worthwhile. As life continues his recuperation, we can only speculate about what the future holds for him. Alone, he make amends with his father and his family in full. Will he face new difficulties worthwhile? Health keep getting better? Above all, how will his loved ones and supporters respond as he mow him onward with his incredible comeback? The answers are not full now. One thing is difficulties of. We are all invested in Little Bettery's narrative, and it is far from over. It's evident that his life has been full of drama and unexpected comeback. From the shock of his known audition to this surprise